The cops showed up just as my daughter was cutting her 10th birthday cake. 6 squad cars, lights flashing in the dusk for a child's birthday party with 10 giggling girls. And standing on her porch across the street, arms crossed with a satisfied smirk, was Brenda, the HOA president who'd declared war on me the day I moved in. Have you ever had that one neighbor who seems to have made it their personal mission to make your life miserable? The kind who watches your every move, measuring your grass with a ruler and sending violation letters for things that aren't even against the rules. If you've ever lived under the tyranny of a homeowners association, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Drop a comment with your own HOA horror stories. I'd love to know I'm not alone in this battle. When my wife and I first moved to Willow Creek Estates, we were thrilled. The houses were beautiful, the neighborhood was safe, and it had that perfect suburban feel we wanted for raising our daughter. The HOA rules seemed reasonable enough. Keep your yard maintained, no visible trash cans, that sort of thing. We should have known something was off when 3 different neighbors warned us about Brenda, the HOA president who'd been running the board unopposed for 7 years. "Oh, she's not so bad," said Jerry from next door, his eyes telling a different story. "Just follow the rules to the letter and you'll be fine." The first violation notice came just 2 weeks after we moved in. Unapproved lawn ornamentation. The offense, a small ceramic frog my daughter had placed by the front door. I checked the rule book twice. No such rule existed. I sent a polite response, citing the lack of such a regulation, and heard nothing. Back 2 weeks later, another notice: improper storage of recreational equipment. This time for our daughter's bicycle, which was leaning against the garage. The rulebook stated bicycles needed to be stored in garages or approved storage areas, which the garage certainly was. "Are you serious?" I asked my wife, showing her the notice. "The bike is literally in the garage." That's when the pattern became clear. Brenda was targeting us. Why? We'd never even had a conversation with the woman. I decided to attend the next HOA meeting to clear things up. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a small building that looked like it hadn't been updated since the neighborhood was built 20 years ago. About 15 residents sat in folding chairs, with Brenda at a folding table at the front, dressed in a crisp pantsuit, as if she were running a corporation, not a neighborhood association. "New resident?" asked an elderly woman beside me as I sat down. "Just moved in a month ago," I replied, trying to figure out why I keep getting violation notices for things that aren't actually violations. The woman chuckled without humor. "Welcome to Brenda's kingdom. She runs this place like her personal fiefdom." When the meeting opened to resident concerns, I raised my hand. "Hi, I'm new to the neighborhood. I've received a couple of violation notices, but when I checked the rule book, I couldn't find the rules I was supposedly violating. Is there an updated version I should be looking at?" Brenda's eyes narrowed. "The rule book is the rule book. If you received a violation, you violated a rule. With respect, I'd like to know which specific rule I violated so I can avoid it in the future," I said, keeping my voice even. A murmur went through the room. Several residents exchanged knowing looks. Brenda's smile was tight. "All violations are documented with the specific rule cited. If you didn't receive that information, it was an oversight. You can request the specific citations from the HOA manager." "But you are the HOA manager, aren't you?" I asked. "As president, wouldn't you have that information?" The room fell silent. Brenda's face flushed slightly. The HOA has procedures. Follow them. The meeting ended shortly after, with several residents approaching me afterward. "You've got a target on your back now," said a man who introduced himself as Tom. "Brenda doesn't like being challenged. Why is she still in charge if everyone seems to dislike her?" I asked. "She does just enough to keep people happy," Tom explained. "The neighborhood looks good. She organizes a couple of events a year, and no one else wants the headache of running the HOA. Over the next few months, the violations continued. Improper mailbox color. It was the same color as every other mailbox. Unapproved holiday decorations. We had put up a single wreath. Excessive noise. My daughter was playing in the backyard during daylight hours. Each time, I would respond politely, citing the lack of actual rule violations, and each time Brenda would escalate. The fines started accumulating, $25 here, $50 there. When I refused to pay, she threatened to place a lien on our house. That's when I decided to fight back. I requested copies of the HOA's financial records and meeting minutes, which by state law they were required to provide. Brenda stalled for weeks, claiming the records were being organized. Finally, after I sent a certified letter citing the state statutes, she relented. What I found in those records made my blood boil. Under landscaping expenses, there were payments to a company that didn't exist, except it did, and it was registered to Brenda's husband. For community event supplies, there were thousands in charges to stores that didn't exist in our state. And for legal fees, there were payments to a law firm that, when I called them, had no record of ever doing business with Willow Creek Estates. I started talking to neighbors, sharing what I'd found. At first, they were reluctant to get involved. "Brenda can be vindictive," said Jerry, my next-door neighbor. "She once fined someone $500 for planting the wrong color flowers." "But she's stealing from all of us," I argued. "Your HOA fees are going right into her pocket." That got their attention. Several neighbors began asking questions at meetings. Brenda grew increasingly defensive, then outright hostile. Things came to a head when we planned our daughter's birthday party. We invited 10 of her friends from school, planning to have it in our backyard with a small inflatable pool and some snacks. We sent out invitations a week in advance. 2 days before the party, a notice was taped to our door. No unauthorized community events without permit. There was no such rule in the HOA bylaws about private parties in your own backyard. I called Brenda immediately. "This is a private birthday party for my daughter in our backyard. It's not a community event. All gatherings of more than 8 people require a permit," she said coldly. "It's in the updated bylaws." "The bylaws can only be updated at a scheduled meeting with a quorum present," I countered. "There have been no meetings since we moved. Here, the board meets as needed," she said. "The party is not permitted. If you proceed, you'll be in violation." I hung up, frustrated but determined. The party would go on. The day of the party arrived, sunny and perfect. The girls were playing in the pool when the first police car showed up, then another and another. Soon, there were 6 squad cars lining our street. An officer approached me as I stood in the backyard, confused. "Sir, we've received multiple noise complaints and reports of an unauthorized gathering." "This is a child's birthday party," I said, gesturing to the 10 girls who were now staring, wide-eyed. "We're not being loud. We're in our own backyard." The officer sighed. "Look, we have to respond to complaints. Can you please keep the noise down?" "We will, officer," I promised, "but you should know who made these complaints and why." I explained the situation with Brenda and the HOA. The officer listened, then nodded toward the street. Is that her, the woman standing on her porch watching all this? Yes, that's Brenda. The officer shook his head. We get calls like this sometimes. HOA disputes. There's nothing we can do about civil matters, but we have to respond to complaints. After the officers left, the girls were shaken, but soon returned to playing. I made a mental note to thank the police chief later for their professionalism. As the party continued, I noticed Brenda taking pictures from her porch. Later, I would discover she was documenting violations to use against me. The next week, I received an official notice, violation of multiple HOA rules, including unauthorized gathering, excessive noise, and improper use of recreational equipment. The fine, $500, I'd had enough. Working with several neighbors, we called a special HOA meeting, following all the proper procedures in the bylaws. We hired a lawyer to attend, and we invited every homeowner in the development. The night of the meeting, the clubhouse was packed. Brenda sat at the front, looking confident until she saw our lawyer and the stack of documents we had. Let's get started, I said, standing up. We're here to present evidence of financial misconduct and abuse of power by the HOA president. Brenda jumped to her feet. This meeting is out of order. You have no authority. The meeting is perfectly in order, our lawyer interrupted. We followed all procedures in the bylaws. Please sit down, Miss Brenda. What followed was 2 hours of exposing exactly how Brenda had been embezzling HOA funds for years, creating fake companies and invoices to funnel money to herself and her family. We had bank statements, fake invoices, and testimony from neighbors who had witnessed her behavior. The most damning evidence came when we presented a letter from the State Attorney General's office, which we had contacted about the potential fraud. They had already opened an investigation. Brenda's face went from confident to panicked to furious. You can't prove anything. These are lies. Actually, we can, our lawyer said, pulling out more documents. And we have. The question now is whether you resign immediately or face criminal charges. The room was silent. Brenda looked around, realizing she had no allies left. Finally, she stood up. This isn't over, she spat, before storming out of the meeting. We held an emergency election that night, and I was nominated, reluctantly, to serve as interim president until we could hold proper elections. The next month was a whirlwind of cleaning up Brenda's mess. We discovered she had been pocketing thousands of dollars in HOA fees, neglecting community maintenance while charging for it, and even using HOA funds to improve her own property. The state's investigation confirmed our findings, and Brenda was charged with multiple counts of fraud and theft. She ended up pleading guilty to avoid a trial, receiving probation, and being ordered to pay restitution. But the poetic justice came when we discovered her biggest scheme. She'd been paying herself a management fee of $2,000 per month for years, a position that was never approved by the HOA board and wasn't in the bylaws. She had literally written herself a paycheck every month from her neighbor's dues. The best part? The lien she had placed on our house for unpaid fines. It was invalid because the fines themselves were based on rules that didn't exist. We had them removed immediately. A few months after Brenda's downfall, we held a neighborhood block party, this time with proper permits, of course. As I looked around at all the neighbors talking and laughing together, Jerry approached me. No, he said, this neighborhood feels different now, lighter. It's amazing what happens when you get rid of the toxicity, I replied. Thanks for what you did, Jerry said. No one else was willing to take her on. "Sometimes you have to stand up to bullies," I said, watching my daughter play with her friends, "even if they're hiding behind HOA rules." As the sun set over Willow, Greek estates, I reflected on how something as simple as a child's birthday party could lead to exposing years of corruption. It just goes to show you never know what small act might be the catalyst for change. Have you ever had to deal with an HOA bully like Brenda? What did you do? Share your stories in the comments below. I'd love to hear how others have fought back against neighborhood tyranny. And if you think HOAs need more oversight, let me know that too. Remember, sometimes the only thing necessary for the triumph of petty tyranny is for good people to do nothing. Stand up for what's right, even if it's just over a ceramic frog or a child's birthday party. You never know what difference you might make.